today?
Okay, yeah. I think we're good to go now. Can you hear me well?
Yes, of course.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'm just sharing the last version that we had of which we shared with you. Sorry, one second, because I was having some technical difficulties. I apologize for this. Um, the last version of the presentation I'm looking for, because I had some trouble downloading it. Center design. Here it is. Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm having some difficulties here because it was in Canva. Okay, I think we're ready to go. Right. I'm just going to share my screen with you. Right, sharing the screen. Can you see the screen well?
It's loading, yes, and now we can see everything, Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so thanks a lot, Mikhail, for the introduction. Just a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today. I think you already heard about the brief introduction about Earth-centered design. So the question is, why are we having this focus on Earth-centered design? So we're going to learn a little bit about the project, which you already know, so we'll skip through that quickly. And we talk a little bit about Earth-centered design. I mean, this is quite an interesting map. As you know, the Earth is not flat, no, because we know since the photo that was taken from the moon that the Earth is a finite resource, that everything is connected through the Earth, through the waters. All communities and societies have always been interconnected and woven into a rich culture of influence between the ways they've related with each other socially and economically, and of course politically as well. So I think it's important to understand that in the last few years, there's been increasing awareness of the interconnectedness and with the increased amount of information now available, it is more and more difficult to sell the stories of divide and rule, of a lot of the stories that are, let's say, imposed by a monoculture of political interests groups that normally represent a minority of people, have historically influenced, let's say, the overall culture, which we can call nationalism or the idea of statehood. But what we want to talk about is go beyond that and talk about the reality that the Earth, through at least the 5,000 years of civilization, and before that 10, 15,000 years of agriculture, and through trade and also through imperialism, has resulted in huge amounts of very rich exchange between different groups and communities and collectives, and has created a kind of like a story, between all these different communities. However, history has been told from a very narrow, let's say, lens, usually, of course, Eurocentric, usually Anglo-centric, especially because of the influence the Anglo-Saxons have had on the telling of the stories of the history recently. But also, we know that through old texts that China, India have been enormous powers throughout history. And there were quite in the last few hundred years, but also the Islamic Empire or the Arab Empire before that had huge influence. So all the southern countries that on this map that you see have been extended, because this is the real map of the world, not the version that we are usually shown. That Africa and South America are actually much bigger than they're normally shown in the normal, let's say, standard map, because they're huge in comparison, for example, to Europe, which is normally put in the center of the map and is shown to be much bigger than it actually is. So you can, of course, look this up. But I think what's interesting is to understand that many times the stories that we're told are not, of course, what we always, let's say, represent the reality of what's best for the common good, what's best for everyone as a collective. And many times they represent specific interest groups. So I think something to understand about what we call the deep acceleration program is to increasingly connect with this regenerative culture, which is a kind of a bottom-up, community-built, local, proximity-based culture that we think is emerging throughout the world, where people are embracing, again, the kind of sense of belonging, the sense of community, the sense of creation of an eco-social fabric that is resilient and is not subject to, let's say, imperial or top-down forces that control markets. And as we know, many times a lot of the wealth from these markets is extracted out through the global financial system into the hands of very few people who control the venture capital institutional funds. And this money usually is exempt from tax because, of course, it's sent to tax havens across, specific locations. In regards to just a little bit about us, Finova is a foundation, as you know, focused on eco-social development, dealing with social challenges, employment, youth, training, participation of women and all marginalized groups, and of course to address the sustainable development goals and to transition to a circular economy that's sustainable. Well, we collaborate with several different organizations, but our work in Human Nation is to advise on development of, let's say, regenerative eco-social ecosystems for transition. And one of the general, let's say, frameworks is the de-accelerator approach to unlearn and to not repeat the same mistakes over and over, because we have been designing for a certain kind of, let's say, structure and certain kind of institutions that are no longer, let's say, serving us, because we know that that system is now come to a grind and is no longer able to, let's say, of course, it will continue in parallel, the same way as the church continues to exist and the banks continue to exist, but the same way as the monarchy continues to exist. But they will be, let's say, demoted to a lower layer of importance, because we're being transitioned now to what's called Society and Culture 4.0, which we can also briefly talk about, because we moved on from tribal and regal societies, feudal system. We moved to capitalism and mercantilism, and then we moved to the third sector, which was the 3.0, to address the challenges that were from the first two sectors, like Greenpeace and Oxfam and so on. So we talk a little bit about why now this new approach should be, because it's still a question mark, because this fourth sector, or Society 4.0, which is a kind of a coming together of all the different sectors into what we call the four helix approach, where public sector, knowledge institutions, like universities and technology centers, but also the businesses, which are majority SMEs and micro companies, or self-employed professionals, which are 99% of the business fabric, and employ more than 55% of people in Europe, that they should collaborate with citizens, the locals, the place where they reside, and create solutions that are, let's say, conducive to life and to well-being in terms of the health of the planet and the people. So it's kind of creating an alliance, which is what's called the fourth sector, so that we can design with nature and design for people so that we don't make the same mistakes as before, so that we don't need a third sector to clean up the mess. Because the third sector is like philanthropy, you know, you make your, in the old way of doing things, I create rubbish, I throw it out of the window, and somebody else cleans it up. But in the new way of thinking, we have to recycle, you know, we have to separate, we have to participate, we have to be part of the overall value chain and participative. So in that sense, the regenerative culture as a design or transformative approaches, that means they're very different to the way we do things today, aimed at addressing environmental challenges and creating sustainable systems. So moving on, so we are talking about resilience and sustainability at the same time, because why is building resilience so important? Because as we know, the long global value chains and fully centralized production, centralized finance, all these, you know, the states, which are also centralized organizations, they act as, in a way, let's say, weak points really in the system, because what they can do is they control the system and they create rigidity in the system so it cannot change. And when change is happening on such a drastic level as we see is happening today, those systems resist, they become more autocratic until they break down. However, what's important to notice is that resilient systems that are based on communities that are self-sufficient, that, let's say, they don't generate so much waste, they live from local agroecology, from proximity food systems. They can even now produce their own energy through having energy communities, to have sustainable mobility or walk or, you know, get an electric bike or there's so many ways now to move around. And of course, to repopulate the rural areas that have been abandoned, where so many people came to cities and were disillusioned by what they found after all, because we have created very noisy, polluted, and chaotic places to live, that we have now realized that the fields are abandoned, and you know, we need to go back in a way, you know, to recover that. And we would do that through regenerative agriculture, so connection with nature, by creating permaculture and regenerative ways of farming that enrich the soil, that enrich the microorganisms, that enrich, you know, the resources that are needed to create healthy food, instead of impoverishing it. So we're creating a regenerative that's been proven scientifically, and there are many existing living labs that demonstrate how community empowerment has created a co-creation approach to create new solutions, applying a lot of ancient methods, but also put together with modern ways. So for example, you can do ancestral mixed crops with animals and everything, but you can also connect it with drip, digitalized, you know, drip irrigation that you can control from your mobile, or solar panels that you can create in your communities, or micro houses that are modular, that can be 3D printed or whatever, that are ecological. So there are many solutions that are coming together now that are kind of ushering a new era. In terms of the importance of regenerative culture in addressing these, of course, it's because regenerative culture thinks in a different way to sustainability, because sustainability is a culture that is born out of a top-down, centralized kind of organizations like the UN, and of course the governments that support it. However, sustainability has a very, let's say, lax ambition in terms of, in fact, more than ambition, I think it's very ambitious, because it thinks that by continuing and doing what we're doing pretty much as we were doing before, but by cutting down here and there, by measuring and offsetting carbon in very peculiar ways that actually are creating new financial markets and bubbles, that we are going to address this huge challenge we have. Whereas the regenerative approach is about degrowth, it's about a different way of living and different priorities. So, for example, not flying as much, maybe getting the train, reinforcing the train infrastructure as they're doing in Europe, rail travel, bus travel, ecological ways of more local and regional tourism, cultural tourism, quality tourism, engagement with local cultures and communities, respect for local cultures, moving away from a kind of a throwaway use and abuse kind of tourism monoculture that we had in the past that have created huge concentrations of people, huge stress in the local infrastructure, huge problems in local, let's say, real estate markets, and the resulting has been that big operators have been taking over, and institutional funds have bought loads of apartment blocks to convert to Airbnb, or all the let's say not so sustainable ways of doing things. Whereas, if you allow me just one second, just check that I'm getting the right messages. Okay, good. Yeah, we admit people. All right, so if I can resume sharing. This was the okay. Sorry. So the regenerative culture is also climate resilience because by nature it is low carbon, and also it offsets the carbon by offsetting it with real effective ways of offsetting carbon, not by planting trees to offset fossil carbon, which is completely absurd because fossil carbon comes from millions of years of processing from deep within the ground, and a tree grows in a few years and it's part of the biosphere. Of course, planting a tree doesn't offset fossil carbon because that's ridiculous. It's scientifically absurd, but it's sold as a sustainable way of, let's say, doing business where you can do your business reporting and so on. Regenerative culture goes deeper than that. It goes to the source of the problem, and that's why unlearning is very important, and co-creating. So you shouldn't believe anybody. There's no gurus or any great autocratic leaders in the regenerative system. It's about collective intelligence and co-creation. Don't ever follow a guru. That's my advice. Because, of course, that can also lead to other problems. So what do we mean by design thinking? Because we're talking about design here. Design is converting a mental or emotional or spiritual or whatever kind of everybody identifies as a creative force to create something real by first conceptualizing it and then converting that through application of resources and ingenuity and all the things that human beings are capable of to develop systems, products, services, infrastructure, networks, all kinds of things, right? So the idea is that until now, design has been product and technology centered and product and technology driven. We moved on to what they called design thinking, which was a UX kind of user-centric kind of design, which put the user at the center, but still with the aim of maximizing user quantity, capturing more and more users to maximize user experience. So it's still very human-centric, but not necessarily Earth-centered. So when we move to Earth-centered design, the difference is that we also take into context the wider living system, which means that we take a holistic approach considering the ecosystem as a whole, including the watershed, the biosphere, the atmosphere, the the soil, the oceans, everything, because of course we are a very small part of all that, and we live in a real world where we consider that we are part of nature, not in some kind of absurd world where we think that we control nature or we're apart from nature. Perhaps in the last 200 years, we have lived in some kind of imaginary idea of dominance and human-centered obsession, reductionism and rationalism, fascinated by atoms and advanced science, which has given us huge insights into technology and science, and from a micro sphere point of view, in terms of how things are constructed. But we have, let's say, lost the wood from the trees. No, we focused on the detail and we forgot that we're part of the whole. And this is what materialism and this kind of ego obsession is about, which is interesting because we become very cognitively developed to develop scientific and technological things. But we become, let's say, the right part of the brain, which is the arts and the culture and language and poetry and expression and all forms of other human expression, which also are, of course, the source of creativity that then lead to further technological advancement and scientific advantage. But also they give perspective, because if you only focus on obsession with genetics or with AI or technology, you're not looking at the big picture of what are you using it for what purpose, what's the bigger question, what are we trying to resolve here, what is the challenge that's being addressed. So we might become obsessed, no, with the outcome rather than the impact. So here it's about respecting also local cultures and creating regenerative solutions. It's a more complete, let's say, approach, a more evolved approach. And of course, Earth-centered design is a very broad, let's say, label to include things like permaculture, circular economy, and biophilic design. So this is biomimicry, of course. So I think that, just correct that. I will share with you these presentations, so don't worry about later you can go through it. So I'm just going to skip through a little bit the main points. So we know many examples of people coming together, combining, community and cultural agency with technology and all the latest possibilities now. Of course, with renewable energy, with passive buildings, net zero buildings, with all kinds of solutions for tourism, for ecotourism, communication, dissemination to improve awareness and create new markets and new brands of sustainable and regenerative, eco-social or social inclusive kind of tourism, culturally sensitive tourism, new value-add products. And of course, tourism doesn't exist in isolation. I mean, something I think you know better than me, because you're from the sector, is that tourism spans across so many different sectors and also depends on many different sectors. So the place is the culture, the infrastructure, all these things are fundamental for tourism to then, thrive. And the context in which we design tourism services and products and solutions and experiences are very much place-based. So they affect food, clothing, artisan, culture, visits to museums, and of course transport and all these other things. And where they're going to sleep, where they're going to stay, what kind of accommodation, is it sustainable, is it not? So as an anecdote, this summer I went to a glamping, which was kind of like tents, and they have a fridge in the tent, and you have your drinks or whatever and some food. But I found that it was quite sustainable, really. I mean, I had the same towel for a few days, and I think that there are ways, and the thing was between the trees and everything was pretty much ecological. And I thought, of course, I mean, if you compare that with a 5-star hotel, with the impact you have with the swimming pool, and of course we're like near the sea, so you just go and have a dip in the sea. Now, who wins, in this kind of different kind of products. Of course, the big players like the big hotels, the big operators would lose out. They would have to change their business model, and the smaller players or the more ingenious or type of startups, like in this case, it was an American startup that's come to Europe and they've kind of franchised. Many of you might know Campao. It's just one example, but of course, that's still a luxury product. It's still exclusive in some way, but it was still quite affordable in comparison with many other things on offer. So I think that if I just quickly move on, and then I would like to open also for your questions. In terms of challenges and barriers, of course, regenerative culture as a whole is ahead of EU policies. However, EU policies are very interested, and EU directives, let's say the departments, the director generals, are very interested in emerging, let's say, what are called very kind of alternative approaches to what was traditionally looked at as sustainability. So they're interested in regenerative part of circularity, interested in inclusiveness, resilience, especially after COVID-19, especially after Ukraine, especially after the Chinese supply chain and the dominance of China in influencing, for example, the production of microchips or lithium batteries or other kinds of batteries, and all kinds of sensitive technologies, but also in the value chain as a whole, the tourism value chain, of course, the way it was before was very vulnerable to things like COVID because of the global, nature and because of the role of the big operators. So I think many people after COVID realized that, a different way of doing things is possible. And I think the policies or regulations are going in that direction, but they're still a little bit behind. So of course, the knowledge and awareness, depending on how knowledgeable and aware people are, that will very much influence also how many people will, let's say, jump ship or become creative in trying to look for new ways of doing things. And of course, huge amounts of financial resources are required and are available. This project is funded by European funding for innovation, in this case, Creative Europe. But there are many other sources of funding that we work with to finance the transition, because of course, Europe and the governments are aware that the only way to get out of this is to co-create and to co-finance, which is what the European Commission does through the innovation programs. And they will support SMEs like you because they see that as a priority to make sure that the innovative SMEs can collaborate into new projects. And we are currently presenting in another COSME for a big accelerator program, precisely because of that. So I think I leave it here with a conclusion, which don't have to go into detail, but I think it would be great if also when I share the presentation with you, there will be also an appendix. For example, the People's Charter for an Eco-Social World is a very interesting example, but I just extracted it from the website. So you will see that there's a lot of work being done on the social, economic, and environmental front in terms of bringing this together, the work with nature, with the people, and in creating resilience. Worth also mentioning technology here, like blockchain, like cryptography, not crypto monedas, not crypto economy, as we know has been exploited and created other bubbles. But I'm talking about the technology of cryptography, decentralized cooperative platforms, or ways of creating, let's say, getting rid of the middleman. And in this case, the middleman is largely the central government and the banks. So fintech is also very much related to, for example, tourism SMEs being aware of fintech solutions that can seriously lower their financial costs, that give them access to crowdfunding, to crowdsourcing, that kind of thing. I would love to hear from you. So I open to you to please give me anything you want to throw at me, and tomatoes as well if you want. Except on your own screen. Thank you. I think I can stop sharing. All right. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Also to say that thank you for being this afternoon here. I jumped into the call because I was a bit nervous to get started with some technological problems. So I'm very happy that you were able to make it, and also this topic that's very passionate, for I think many of us. So it's interesting to hear your views, and maybe a couple of examples from each of you in terms of how you feel that your business could be, taking the strengths that your business you already have, but also the challenges and opportunities that are present, and maybe turning your business into anything that comes to your head, or you might already have something developed that you might say, I think that's how I could go further. Even 2 or 3 examples where it feels like sharing. That would be great. Thank you. Would anybody want to go first, or I can suggest? I think Gregor and Angeles, they had some things on the tip of their tongue. Adolfo as well. I saw. I don't know. Rafael, I think is pretty. Also got some ideas. Carlos, I see the people on the screen. Anybody wants to jump in? And any questions about the topic in terms of maybe how you compare it with sustainability, or a lot of demand on your business to report sustainability and compliance and all that? I don't know.
I can start. I think that the idea is very good, like a big idea, but how to concrete in something real?
Well, I mean, I gave you a very overview. Is that the question that you wanted to know about concrete steps?
No, for instance, I had in mind that of the roof gardens.
Yes.
Like a solution. This is something concrete, but the other things I saw in the presentation is too much general. Too much topic, too much idealistic, no?
Yeah.
So how to relate to some real project in tourism?
Well, I think, I mean, my understanding is that this is an emerging, let's say, market, if you want to call it that. Now it's a very different kind of market. Of course, many people will exploit it in different ways. There'll be, let's say, some greenwashing, some people that jump on the ship. Some people will pretend like any other fashion. Now everybody talks about circular, everybody talks about regenerative, everybody talks about AI. But in terms of the more deeper and real impact, there are many, many examples already now in terms of the Eco Village network, the transition towns, the many circular cities, a lot of these smart villages that are already in Europe, a lot of ecological and social farms, and touristic kind of rural solutions that have been provided, a lot of high-tech AI and virtual reality cultural tourism products that have been created. Even with blockchain, I can tell you a cooperative platform, for example, that's called Airbnb, that was kind of brought in to challenge Airbnb to try and be more fair platform, which was the original idea of platforms, to create more even, let's say, horizontal value chain so that people can get more percentage. But of course, Airbnb took the biggest piece of the pie. But I'm just giving you examples at the technological side, the cultural side, the ecological side, the social. I have a colleague of mine in co-working that has a project that's inclusive tourism, so families that want to travel with people with disabilities, They can have a fluid and, let's say, good user experience or good customer journey wherever they visit, their full itinerary. So there are many examples. Depends also on your focus of your project. Is it more ecological? Is it more social? Is it at the moment conventional and you're thinking of converting to become more eco-friendly or more eco-social? So all these things are, of course, depending on you, because you're the creator, you're the, let's say, the co-creators or the entrepreneur. And this change in the world, a big piece of the puzzle depends on you. You know, whatever you guys do will have an impact on the next generation of water tourism products. No, it's, I would say, it's up to us. I think the best way is to co-create and work with other people, join many communities that are already being formed to inform us, but to also collaborate and to offer real possibilities that are already working, that are proven, that economically they're working, that they are socially just, that they are ecologically much more sound. And nobody said you have to jump in the deep end tomorrow. You know, you can become more ecological, more social. Is better than not. You know, so what is the, you know, step by step, you know, poco a poco, like they say in Spain. But some people will go faster than others, I tell you.
Yeah, sure.
And
Okay,
don't
thank
get
you.
caught by surprise. Don't get caught by surprise, because this change is drastic. So if we're too slow, we might get surprised. Sorry, go ahead, Carlos.
Okay, thank you.
Please. Yeah. Yeah, we don't want like the Kodak moment. So sorry, go ahead.
Maybe we should consider the concept of a slow entrepreneurship related to a slow, trying to adapt the innovation to the needs of communities, to the real needs of climate change problems that we have here in Spain. We have a lot of problems with water management. It's a very important thing is happening in Valencia, at least, or in Catalonia, for example, and we have to address many of the problems that are urgent in this moment. So I think your approach is very important. It's very important at the same time that is not only earth-centered, but people-centered at the same time. We have to have a double approach, because social and environmental is vital. We never have to forget both things come together, always when we seek to innovate. And related to tourism and related to culture, is something that it's vital in this moment to integrate from the beginning of innovation, to innovate with people, to innovate with social awareness to these problems is the first thing that we have to do. Maybe it's vital to encourage and make people understand the urgency of this approach, of this way of understanding what we have to do through innovation. It's the concept of triple impact as we seek, economical, social, and environmental at the same time. I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that in the title actually it doesn't appear, but the program is called Earth-Centered and Human-Centered Design. So it's absolutely, as you say, the two things go together. And in fact, the Earth on its own works perfectly well. It's the fact that humans interfered in certain natural processes and created, let's say, disharmony. And now it's about correcting that. So when we talk about Earth-centered design, we're talking about our own influence on the Anthropocene, no, the human influence on the ecosystem, because
Yes,
otherwise, yeah.
And also to consider the human environment. The human environment, I mean, with the human environment, to understand the cultures of the people, the history of the people. That is something that at the same time that we are losing our environment, we are losing also our cultures, because globalization is having a very deep impact in local cultures. Here in my city, we are losing a lot of traditional shops, traditional places that existed when I was born. And right now, totally disappearing. So we have to also consider that our culture and our history have been threatened at the moment. It's not so important as environment, but the human environment that created through culture, through historical documents is also very important, and we are losing it day by day. It's incredible, incredible in the accelerating process that we are making, that our cities are becoming thematical parks, theme parks. Always the same thing. Each city is always the same thing, and our local culture, local people are disappearing. I understand it as the blood of the cities. Tourists are not the blood of the cities. Citizens who were born and live all day in those cities are the real important thing that has to be preserved from globalization. That's another important point that should be addressed and considered. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you so much, Adolfo. I think you should run for the tourism director general of tourism, or in your city at least, because I totally agree with. Or even through your own innovation in your product, because I think this is a fundamental point you made about monoculture. But throughout history, any empire or any centralized force has always tried to impose their own worldview, or even a created worldview, just as a way of getting markets. As we know, religion is a perfect example of one of the biggest markets that was created. So that's my personal view, of course. And I think that empires evolved into corporations, as we well know, and corporations are developing and maximizing, let's say, what was already developed by the old empire, and the old empires, or now the corporations evolved into BlackRock and Blackstone. So there's really only 3 corporations in the whole world, because those 3 institutional funds, they own the corporations, and therefore there is no competition now. And we know that behind these institutions, there's always been very few very influential families that can be from any part of the world. So in fact, when you see McDonald's or Carrefour or these places that look the same, like Zara, the front men or the CEOs, or like puppet regimes, really, because although they can be ingenious and great entrepreneurs, they have been utilized. People like, they utilized other people's work many times also, and expropriated the licenses and IPs of other people's ingenuity or collective work. We know that a very good example of that is people like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Amazon. All these technologies were already created by people, but they were expropriated, and Microsoft is one of the biggest licensors, no? Or Facebook is one of the biggest buyers of startups that they kill. Facebook was registered as one of the companies that had bought more startups and killed them in order to push competition. So of course, monoculture is born out of that kind of autocratic, centralized, what has been either led to communism or fascism in both extremes. Doesn't matter, they're the same. At the end of the day, or capitalism, which is a more egalitarian way of doing it. But still, it creates armies of workers, of slaves, of people that have to adhere to certain norms that are very limited, and institutions that are rigid, and therefore it's not compatible with local culture. And the local culture has always been fighting against this dominance, of a top-down, no?
Yes. So we have to try to address an innovation that is unlicensed and open source. Maybe we forget about the open source, open to the public, open to all the people be able to use it. That's very common in European research projects, but in reality, when you look at that, always disclosed, are full of black boxes everywhere. So
that's true. I mean, there is some element of protection of certain element of value created. I think there's a blended approach, but many of the things that we do are open source. In fact, we have Creative Commons licenses in the project because we believe that everything has always been open source. In fact, we have always learned from others. Innovation is highly incremental. So anybody that believes that they, even Now they want to get IP on plants and herbs and animals and insects because they've run out of things to control, because everything has always been either there or created already by others, and IP has been a way of expropriating that knowledge and exploiting it.
That's a great reality that not everyone is aware of.
Great debate. So let's carry on. If there's anybody else, that I think it's worth mentioning that one of our partners, because we talked a lot about technology, and one of our partners, Arctur, of course, Mateos is here. Maybe he's already spoken with you already, I know, or I don't know if the first one was about your work, Mateos, but you can tell us briefly. For example, Tourism 4.0, which is a framework that they have developed. It's all about for Helix collaboration. It's about open data. It's about creation of platforms and participation, especially bottom up, but also alignment with the top down, so that governance can be influenced through data, through local participation. So, Mateos, please, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think you made a really nice introduction and connected it to your topic. I mean, initially, maybe the topic of tourism, of digitalization of tourism and digitalization of cultural heritage doesn't seem directly connected with Earth-centered design, but it is, of course. And I agree, Tourism 4.0 that we are running as a company, that we have started 4 years ago as an initiative to bridge this gap between tourism and technology, because we see that many tourism providers are using technology, but they're not in control of that technology. So they use the large platforms. They pay quite a lot of money for it, or they give up the percentages, the fees for the platforms, but they're not in control of the data that is created there, which is a problem. Because they're just consumers then of the platforms, and they cannot actually benefit from the data that they're creating together. So this is that was already in 2018 the idea of Tourism 4.0, which I think is now being taken up somehow by the data spaces of European Commission. So maybe this is something that we will open up next time that we are having a meeting. But just to briefly say that the European Commission is establishing so-called data spaces, also data space for tourism, data space for cultural heritage, for various sectors. The idea is that there is a European way of collecting data and exchanging and sharing that data, and of course benefiting from it in a different value setting as maybe we're used from the American way, where everything is a commodity, or the Chinese way, where everything is of the party, so it's politically influenced. So in Europe, we are searching for a middle way. I'm not sure that we found it, but we are searching for it.
Collaborative and participative. I mean, either model that you mentioned is very top down, no? It's kind of like imposed.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the idea. It's not easy. I won't admit it, and it's in a way slower than it would be in any other format. That's why we see that the European Union is only now doing that, not maybe 10 years ago when it would be in time. Now we are a little bit behind of everything.
And we are reacting to China or to US.
Exactly. Yeah.
When we already had the policies, but they didn't have the guts, let's say, to go ahead.
Yeah.
But
I agree. I mean, next time next in 14 days, I won't be speaking so much about the data and the sharing of data. I want to more focus on tourist experiences and how to incorporate new technology into new tourist experiences. I want to give you more examples, and I want to specifically link these tourist experiences to cultural heritage. What consequentially at the end, maybe next time we will open up, is that all these experiences again will be or are creating data that could be used by the destinations themselves, by different stakeholders within destinations. And this is something that is popping up. It's not ready, it's not plug and play solution. We need to know that, and this is something that is still ongoing, still in establishment.
So we very much look forward to that, and also be interesting to see how that can relate with sustainability and social inclusion. We also said maybe a couple of case studies. I'll also look for that to maybe find some publication we can put on the web of case studies. That would be interesting. Maybe what we can do is also collectively map the ecosystem a little bit with other people who might have ideas of projects that are inspiring, and especially co-created projects, because of course they're the stars. And as you were asking before, just to wrap up on my side, that how can this be practically implemented? Of course, we can think about the final solution, but many times the answer is in the process of the transformation of the individual, the entrepreneur, and the community while they co-create. And a lot of new market opportunities are actually found through that process. In fact, of what's the ingenuity, or innovation, where we see many new products were born out of that kind of co-creative, and new markets were created. So just as an example, I can tell you that this process influences everything from the way you get finance, as we saw as an example, the way you get IP, the way you treat your IP, the way you develop products. Also the way you even do marketing. So for example, now there's a fashion of pull marketing or attraction marketing. In the old days, what was much more compatible with the kind of what you mentioned, as Mateos mentioned, as an American model, was like a top-down, like push, push notifications into people's phones, send them mail, put junk through their posts, give them leaflets as they walk, the billboards, everywhere, TV adverts, published. So that kind of push marketing is a good example of how that philosophy goes very much like hand in hand, with exactly that kind of extractionist, user-centered UX, which is used about using, consuming, whereas the other one about regenerative culture is about attracting and creating dynamic, self-sufficient, and self-generated markets. Because if you really need something, you will buy it. If you need food, you will buy it. If you want to buy it from this person, you buy it from this person. If not, you buy it from the other one. But you need to be given the options. The problem is that we are many times tricked by marketing stars and gurus to get things we don't even want or need, and many times the wrong products. So I think awareness of a regenerative culture is much deeper about going into our own self and unlearn a lot of the patterns, and about how we consume, about what our priorities are, and also about how we relate, what we call the three divides, how we relate with nature, how we relate with one another, and how we relate with ourselves. Today, these are the greatest divides in our society, but the sources of why these divides exist is much deeper, and they're structural, they are cultural, they are ultimately based on thoughts that have either been manipulated or traumas, ancestral traumas, or family traumas, or systems that we continue to feed through our belief systems and through our values. So ultimately, that's why we believe also, as Adolfo was stressing out, that cultural and Mateo said the importance of culture at the heart of all this is very fundamental. And as we go deep into what we call dynamic or diverse cultures, we see that they're very different in terms of, let's say, language, in terms of the way they behave or their rituals. But the essence underlying human culture across all of these cultures is the same. And that's why there's a common language. When different people from different cultures come together, it's very easy to relate with them, because ultimately we see that the underlying culture, the human culture, is the same. And this is, of course, not appreciated by monoculture. That's why huge amounts of funds are being put into divide and rule tactics and the creation of enemies. Because if we did believe in a single pattern of human culture, then they wouldn't be able to create silo markets and divide and rule, not into class systems or luxury products and, you know, first class and second class and all these different tiers and things that have been created. So I think from my side is the same, but I just wanted to give you this upfront, because the next stages we would like to go much more into detail in some couple of workshops, masterclasses, and also do some practical case studies of actually co-creation workshops, where we are trying to tackle some common challenges that will be brought by yourself with the collaboration with the partners. So that will be really interesting. I look forward to the next phase where, as you were saying, we need to get hands dirty, get our hands dirty. Okay. Anything else from anybody else before we wrap up? Please feel free to be in touch through either LinkedIn, or we can create a WhatsApp group if one doesn't already exist for the community to chat. Or Telegram, if you have Telegram, is better, but I don't know if it's better, but this is more encrypted. So here we go. We'll be in touch, and we will create channels so we can be more fluid in communicating in the meanwhile. Is there anything, Manuela, that you'd like to add to close on the communication side?
No, maybe just to remind the upcoming events, that the next workshop we have it on the 3rd of March. So just keep in touch with the webpage, and as usual, we are going to communicate with you for the agenda and the link. But for my side, I think it's all, and thank you very much, Sharon, for your interesting presentation.
Manuel, I think it's 5th of March, not 3rd, because 3rd is Sunday.
Oh, okay. Let me check.
5th of March, in 14 days.
Perfect. Thank you, Matheus.
Okay, have a nice evening, afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Okay.
Bye bye.